So glad that so many of you are here today on a Saturday morning. It's always never fun to work on the weekends, but I will promise you that it will be worth it. So we are here today. Hang on, I have to log in here. My name's Donna Heitmanek, and I am the host of the Science of Reading What I Should Have Learned in College Facebook page. And it's my honor and pleasure to host this learning series with Pati Montgomery and Angie Hanlin of the book It's Possible, a leadership plan for implementing quality reading instruction and ensuring literacy for all. That's a mouthful, and it needs to be because there's so much to do in that space. But we are here to learn how to do it from those that have been in the field and those that are continue to do this hard work. I've had the pleasure of working with both of these ladies in the past 5 years, and I believe in the processes that they will be teaching you today. If you are willing to do the work, then your school will get the results. Today, you will be learning a great deal about that, how to do that process. And I welcome all of you here today. And thanks for choosing to do this on your day off. So take it away, Angie and Pati.
Okay, well, I'm going to start, and we are so excited. We feel like the book is something that was tremendously missing in the field. The book is geared toward leaders, and by leaders, we specifically mean principals and district leaders. And we're going to talk about what the book lays out, particularly one section, one chapter in universal instruction. But overall, what it does do is it outlines the systems and structures necessary to increase reading outcomes. Because if you think about it, the systems and structures that are in a balanced literacy approach are 100% different than the systems and structures necessary in a structured literacy approach. We also believe strongly that principals, and I'm going to show you some research here in just a second, that principals should be instructional leaders. In fact, the research on instructional leaders far outweighs any other type of leadership in schools. And the whole book, It's Possible, is based on the research of what effective leaders do, the science of reading, and what effective schools do. Many people aren't aware that there is actually a lot of research on what effective schools do and what effective principals do. Angie, can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Well,
You're
so why
welcome.
why the principal? Well, look at this. This is just one. And I literally have many, many pieces of research that indicate why we need to focus our work on the principal. Look at this one. The reading gains from replacing a below average principal with an above average one would be larger than approximately 50% of the effects on reading achievement of various educational interventions in 747 studies, not one study, 747 studies. The principle makes a huge difference. Next one, Angie. Further, after working myself with literally hundreds of schools, we have never seen a literacy initiative to be effective without a strong principal at the helm. And then there's one more thing I'd like you to think about. Angie and I both know, go ahead, Angie, next one. Angie and I have both seen in person schools get to 100% of students proficient. But let's think for just a minute. We know that it's possible to have all students reading at grade level with all of our heart and soul. But it's not possible if only 50% of teachers can get there. So we talk about instructional coaching a great deal in our industry, and I am the biggest believer of instructional coaching. However, not number one, not all schools have an instructional coach. That's a luxury in many, many schools. And not only that, the premise of instructional coaching, as it should be, I strongly believe in this as well, is that teachers should volunteer to be coached. That, hey, can you help me? I'd like more help. Well, who volunteers for coaching? What we have found in our experience is it's typically the teachers who are already good who volunteer for coaching. So they continue to get better. Well, we can't get to 100% of students reading at grade level unless someone is providing coaching to all of the teachers. So typically, it's incumbent upon the instructional leader or the principal to provide that feedback to a teacher who's resistant to getting coaching. So that's how we get 100% of teachers there. Angie had been an instructional coach before she became a principal. She was well aware of how to give instructional feedback, which is what made the difference in her school. And she didn't have an instructional coach when she started. So she knew how to provide instructional feedback to all of the teachers in her building. Next one, Angie. So today, oh, look at that. The S dropped when we switched.
Oh, sorry.
Anyway, components used to be all on one line. So what are the key components of universal instruction that we found to be highly effective that we're actually going to dig into this morning? Well, the first one is we need 90 to 100 minutes of literacy. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. In fact, we're going to hone in on each of these. Your literacy block needs to have both whole group and small group instruction. There needs to be an instructional hierarchy of skills delivered in an instructional hierarchy. It all needs to be delivered in an explicit manner in both whole group and small group. And there needs to be a clear and purposeful sequence of instruction. And there needs to be an instructional alignment of materials. Next one, Angie. Okay, so let's talk about, oh, that one dropped too. Let's talk about the literacy block for just a minute. And this is whole group instruction. The ideal time is really 120 minutes. You can see, and the book lays out how much time should be spent on the various components of literacy for each grade level. And so you can see kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and third grade through fifth and sixth. Today, we're going to have a principal with us, Stephanie Cole from Norristown School District, who we're going to introduce you to in just a minute. She's the principal of a school that only has kindergarten students. Can you imagine? She has nearly 300 kindergarten students. So obviously, Stephanie is focused on the kindergarten portion, but the times that's spent on each thing changes as kids get older in the literacy block. Next one, Angie. So there's also, as we teach in whole group instruction, how students should read an instructional hierarchy. We begin with the smallest component, phonemic awareness and letters and sounds, and then very much go to phonics, and then applying that research into decodable so that we immediately know how to use those skills when kids are ready for a decodable, which we find in kindergarten that they're ready for a decodable. And then we go to that direct instruction of vocabulary and the words that the students are going to encounter, and then fluency, language comprehension, and comprehension. Go ahead, Angie. Let's talk about small group instruction for just a minute. So we believe, and there's been a lot of talk on the social media in the past year about really our entire block should be just small group. And I have to tell you, though I believe strongly in small group, I also believe that we need a whole group stent and a small group stent. All students should be receiving grade level content, concepts, vocabulary. And you don't get that unless you have both whole group and small group instruction. There, it indicates how much time kids should spend in teacher-led small group instruction. If kids are above grade level, they don't need, and of course, it's best if we can get to all kids every single day in small group instruction. But actually, if we don't have time, we can get the above grade level group in just 2 to 3 times per week. Angie, the next one. So the next big part of explicit instruction is explicit instruction. But what many people are also unaware is that there are two big components to explicit instruction. There is the design of how your lesson looks, how we've laid out the lesson, and then there is the delivery. Many people think that I do, we do, you do is the component of explicit instruction. Yet explicit instruction also includes frequent student responses, monitoring student work. There's actually about 9 components between both design and delivery of the lesson that teachers should be using throughout the literacy block. Certainly not all 9 every day, but many components. In the book, we've included, Angie, the next slide. Exactly. This is part of what the design of an explicit instruction looks like. We start with the big idea. We clearly know the conspicuous strategies that we're going to teach. That's the I do part. And then the mediated scaffolding, how we do the we do and the you do. And then the mediated scaffolding. Anyway, all of those pieces are a part of the design and the delivery of the lesson. Angie? So there is a definite cadence to the literacy block. As I mentioned, the ideal time is about 120 minutes, including both whole group and small group instruction. And gradual release, again, what we think of as I do, we do, you do, is not just from the teacher teaching. It's also a gradual release of knowledge to the student in 2 ways. So when we begin our lesson, as we talked about, we start with phonemic awareness and phonics, the smallest pieces of reading. But then as we go on throughout the course of the literacy block, in one literacy block, by the end, we've taught them reading. We've taught them reading components. So kids should be reading every single day. But our gradual release also extends throughout the week. In the beginning of the week, we have much more teacher-directed instruction. And by the end of the week, students should be practicing more. Teachers should be stepping back, and students should be engaging more in their work, regardless of the grade level. That's true from kindergarten to 5th or 6th grade. We have to make sure that students make those connections, but are doing something authentically. So we start with the small, make connections to the next bigger item, and then the next bigger item. Go ahead, Angie. And we have to ensure that they are reading what you are teaching every single day. Phonics, phonemic awareness, vocabulary, they shouldn't be taught as singular activities. Each one must be aligned so that students get more opportunity for repetition and to build on one small thing to the next. Learning to read, as I said, is not different activities. It's about using the skills to complete a real task so that children absolutely love to read. Okay, Angie, I'm done.
Okay.
You take it
So,
over.
okay, Patty, is it best then for me at this time to stop sharing?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. All right. Okay. So, I stopped. So now is it okay now? Okay. Okay. Are we good? All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Patty and I have been so excited to talk about this and get this information out to educators. So I'm so glad you're here. the rest of our time together, how we're going to frame this is I'll be talking for a few minutes about my experience doing this work, and the work is transforming universal instruction. That's our topic for today. I will then bring in another principal that Patti mentioned earlier, Stephanie Cole, and we'll talk about her journey and what she's doing right now with her team and the results that they're getting. You will hear some similar things that we'll both talk about at different age levels, but you will hear some similar things. Now, she and I have deliberately planned so that you will hear different things from each of us. We're both going to focus on a few different components, but I want to point out that you will hear similar things. And the reason why I want to point that out is because as schools go through this work, as they begin to transform Tier 1 universal instruction, and as they go through any type of change or transformation in literacy, there are common things that happen along that journey. It truly is a journey, and it's a very common journey that schools go on. So the greatest thing, in my opinion, about all the information that's in the book is when you take every single bit of it and you boil it down, every single bit of it can be replicated in every single school in our country. If you're teaching students and if you're teaching school, then all of this work can be replicated and we can all reach those proficiency rates of 95 to 100%. So my journey began as an elementary principal at Matthews Elementary. It's one of 3 elementaries in the New Madrid County R1 school district. I saw school board members, our school board president from that district, and teachers. They're on here, so shout out to them. Thanks for joining this morning. And the school serves students in grades preschool through 5th grade. It is a small rural school, so we were very small staffed when this work began. I did not have the luxury of having an instructional coach or even a teacher who was set aside for full-time interventions. Often, if you have an interventionist, that person can step up and possibly do some coaching. I was all of it. I would be principal, instructional coach, professional development, all of it. And as a leader, I think it's critically important to point out that teachers must see us as leaders, as the person who is leading the work in the building, that we're doing this with them, that we're all in it together. This is not something that we're doing to the teachers or at the teachers, that it's a journey and we're all in it together. So to do that, I had to determine what instruction looked like in our school. Where were we at? I love John Hattie's questions. Where are we? Where are we going? And how close are we to reaching that goal? So where were we? What did our instruction look like? Well, to determine that, I knew I had to be in the classrooms. I would never be able to lead this work from my office or from an office. I was going to have to be in the classrooms. But because that had not been common practice out of the building leaders in the building before, one, it had to be explained that this is what it was going to look like. And you were going to see me all about everywhere all the time. But I had to strategically and intentionally plan for this and set aside time to be in rooms daily, and the teachers would know I would be there. I actually brought in the help of the building secretary to support me in this and to say, this is my schedule. We're going to protect these times and make these times sacred. I will be doing this on a daily basis. I had her help in supporting me with parents to say when a parent called. Of course, if it was an emergency, now I would have taken the call. But to say, Mrs. Hanlin is in classrooms and she will answer this message. She'll take this message as soon as she gets back. So as leaders, we have to intentionally, strategically plan for this to happen, because I can tell you, if we wait, it will never happen accidentally. It will not happen by accident. It is intentionally designed. So where was our instruction? Well, I knew from the amazing training that I had on the science of reading from Dr. Jan Hasbrook and Dr. Vicki Gibson, and then when Patti came into my life, that science of reading research tells us that instruction needs to be 2 things. It needs to be systematic and explicit. And that's what I went into classrooms looking for. And I can tell you that the instruction was neither one of those things. It was not explicit, and it most definitely was not systematic. And as a superintendent, I went on to become a superintendent, and I had the exact same journey. It was neither of those things either. Teachers were not only not teaching explicitly, more importantly, they did not realize they were not teaching explicitly. They did not realize they were not designing explicit lessons and they were not delivering explicit lessons. So they were going to need a lot of professional development, coaching, and support. But the first thing they needed is what Pati pointed out. And it's something that I mistakenly understood my first several years of teaching. I focused on explicit instruction as the delivery. Was I delivering it in an explicit manner? But I learned you can't deliver an explicit lesson if you haven't designed for an explicit lesson. So we began with a design component. To do that, we started with a common lesson plan template that teachers were coached on how to complete that. We had expectations with that lesson plan template that lessons would be designed on a grade level standard. There would be a clear learning objective, and that learning objective would be shared with students. It would be posted. Students would read it along with the teacher. It would be explicitly referred to multiple times through the lesson. They would state the relevance of why students were learning that day, why they needed to know that information. We took the focus off of teaching and placed it on the learning. So it's not whether we had taught the lesson or not. It's had the student learned it. So we deliberately designed, how are we going to check for that? What would our check for comprehension be to see if the students had learned it? We shared with students the success criteria. We built that into the lesson plan. This is how we will know if you have learned it. So this led us, by looking at that, we realized that every single lesson was going to need that component. We built it into our lesson plan of I do, we do, you do. Because really, when I surveyed teachers, when I said, what does explicit instruction mean to you? That's really all they could give me. They had heard of Anita Archer and they had heard of I do, we do, you do, and they didn't know much beyond that. So when teachers got really good at designing the lesson, and then we started focusing on the delivery of the lesson, was it explicit? Were the students engaged? Was there teacher talk and student talk? And how are we eliciting those responses from the students? Were the students reading aloud? What did that lesson actually look like when we got to the delivery phase? And when the teachers got really good at something, we went and we had other teachers go in and watch them. We made video clips and then shared it throughout. We celebrated any and all growth by our teachers, and we focused on one thing at a time. By working with Pati, I learned one thing at a time, and we waited until 85% of teachers were doing it consistently 85% of the time. And like I said, we focused on all growth, and I shared those percentages out. Hey, I just completed a series of walkthrough, and 85% of teachers had a clear learning intention that was based upon a standard. Very explicitly explained to teachers what I was seeing. There was a walkthrough tool that the teachers had in their staff handbook, in their binder. And they knew this is what Mrs. Hanlin and what Angie's looking for when she comes in. And when people come in my room, this is what is the expectation that they will see. And then when we were working through all of this coaching and support, after they had had the professional development and I was doing all the walkthroughs, I then stopped and asked the teachers. I had been an instructional coach, and Dr. Jan Hasbrook had coached me on how to be the instructional coach. Then I went and I actually said to the teachers, I met with them, what do you need from me for coaching? Do you need? Some said they needed for me to sit down and help them write and plan out those lessons. That's where they were struggling. Others said I need it modeled in my classroom. So if I see it, then I can do it. Where others said, you know what? I feel comfortable after the professional development. I want to try it, and I want you sitting there to give me the feedback as to what I need to do next. So after we started working on that, this led us, as Pati had talked about previously, to completely redesign the literacy block. And not only redesign the literacy block, but to take the 90 or the 120 minutes and to break it into these chunks. How much time would be spent on each component? So we did that in the K2 section and the 3-5 section. And then we had to determine what part of the curriculum that the teachers were using would be given in whole group, what part would be given in small group. So then we dove deeper and we really drilled down. What will teachers bring out in their instruction in whole group, and what part of it will be done in small group? And we really worked to perfect all of those components. But I want to point out some key things that teachers struggled with because I think it would be common with teachers everywhere. One of those was as they were teaching the subject of reading and then really got into the content, they did not understand the difference of teaching the skill versus strategy, a reading skill versus a reading strategy. They did not know how to differentiate that instruction in small group. They did not understand what were the most effective ways to check for comprehension to see if students had gotten it or not. They did not know what might need to be on an exit slip. Classroom discussion, how to elicit those responses. So instead of just calling on one student at a time, how do you get choral responses? We brought a lot of signals, focus, think, speak, motions into all of that. And that was commonplace. So that led to the systematic piece of the instruction. Another thing that teachers struggled with was how to get more than one student reading at a time. Because when I first would go into walkthroughs, not only were students not reading during the reading hour, they were not reading aloud. Teachers were doing most of the reading, or students were reading silently. So how to get everyone reading? Boys read this with me, girls read, students read to me, read with me, all these different ways. So as we started working on that, then we were able to start looking at systematic instruction. And when I say systematic instruction, what we mean by that is it's consistent and systematic throughout the building. It's not one teacher doing one thing in one room and another. Now, I don't mean a cookie cutter approach to that because it looks different at different grades and it can be delivered differently by teachers. But one of the first things that we said this is going to be systematic in our building was how we would teach vocabulary. We had a systematic approach to vocabulary that was based on research, and then everybody in the building taught vocabulary in the same manner. And I want to point out there how powerful that was for our students, because then they didn't have to relearn a new approach and a new strategy at every grade. It also helped then for teachers to go watch other teachers. So we continued to work through that walkthrough. We continued to give the teachers the coaching and support that they needed. And then by that work, something happened. And I remember the day I sent an email to Jan Hasbrook about it and a text and then a follow-up phone call to Pati Montgomery. And I said, the dialogue has changed in our building. We had a weekly instructional focus, and it changed the dialogue. Teachers began then talking to other teachers about what are you doing in your room? How are you getting the results? What are you doing to get the results in your data? Okay, so check for comprehension. What's that look like in your room? Here's how I'm doing it. And it really then, after the dialogue changed, we saw a shift in our culture. And our culture became focused on instruction and learning, and not on just teaching, but on learning. And teachers stopped taking it as, oh no, I have failed as a teacher. But they really started seeing my teaching leads to their learning. And if they didn't learn, I just need to do something else with my instruction. And they stopped taking it so personally. So with that, that's a little bit about my journey. You're going to hear a little bit more as we go on. But at this point, I have the privilege of bringing in a phenomenal leader who's doing this work right now on the ground, boots on the ground, and they're actively, deeply involved in this work. And she's getting excellent results with her teachers. So we're going to bring in Miss Stephanie Cole. Thank you for being with us today. We can't wait to hear about the work you're doing with your staff.
Good morning.
So welcome, Stephanie. Thanks for being with us. If you will start off, tell us, as I have done, tell us about your role and about your building and the staff that you are working with right now.
So my role here at the Musselman Learning Center, I'm the principal of the building. And as Pati had, indicated earlier, it's a building of all kindergarten students, which is a rare opportunity. You don't have too many, buildings out there that are all kindergarten students. I became a principal 11 years ago. So I've been, very proud of the work that that we've done over those 11 years. But I'm particularly proud of the work that we've done over the last 2 years, when I was able to partner with Patty and Schools Queued, because she has completely transformed me as a leader, and our building, my teachers as teachers. So my journey with Patty began, last year. And when I was approached by our curriculum supervisor, Jen Lynch, about this opportunity. And, she was telling me about the work that Patty has done, how it could transform instruction, in the North Center Area School District, and ask if I would be willing to, have Patty come into our building and help me and help our teachers. And I was like, of course, if we're going to improve instruction, we're going to improve student data, let's go, we'll do it. So last year, Patty and her team, along with our administrative team, came into the building and first started with, that audit of, going through every classroom, during that literature block, and finding out what were our strengths and what were our weaknesses. What did we really need to work on? And we had, if I just back up a year, we all know the challenges that COVID brought for teachers and the challenges of coming back to school after COVID. And what we were seeing happening, like that second year after COVID, was the teachers were still in my building. I'm speaking from my building. The teachers were still, stuck in those routines and procedures that they had done, for online teaching. So we really kind of wanted to get away from that. And one of the most important blocks for me was our foundations block. Considering we are a kindergarten center, we really needed to get the most bang for our buck there. So that's where I really started to see that we needed to make improvements, and we needed to move away from, that online way of instructing where teachers are using slideshows, as opposed to actually teaching. So that was the work that I had started prior to Patty coming in. Patty came in, and we were in the midst of that, and she too echoed, "We really need to work on your foundations block stuff." And that was really the first area that we started, to work on, with Patty, and we worked on it all of last year. And a big part of that work, as you said, Angela, is being in the classrooms. I've always been a principal that, really has not been one to stay in my office. I've been out, I've been about, I've been visible. That's the culture that I've developed. My teachers know that, Steph might stop in the classroom, and maybe it's just to say hello to a student. Maybe it's to sit in there for 5 or 10 minutes. Maybe it's to actually do a walkthrough. But that's the type of culture that I've kind of developed here. So when this, work began with Patty, it was different for my teachers, because I was in the classrooms even more, than I had been previously. And in there with looking through a whole different lens, if you will.
Yes.
So that was a lot of getting used to. I mean, I've always gone into, this role as I truly believe that the teachers you're in this for the right reason. Their hearts are in it for the right reason. What they're doing, they're thinking is best for children. But if you as the leader aren't in there to see what they're doing, you don't have any idea, and you don't know how to really support and guide them through what they're doing. So with working with Patty and going into the rooms and really looking at instruction through a different lens really helped start to change the landscape of things here at Musselman.
And I think too that when the teachers see that as the leader, that you're going through growth as well, and that you're getting coaching and you're getting support. And when you say, I don't know all of this, we are in this together. I'm learning just like you are. And it sets up that, I know, Stephanie, you and I've had this conversation, that it sets up that we're all on this learning journey. We're all doing this together. We're all going to be changing things. And I think that helps earn their trust because they see, like you said, we are going at this through a different lens, and we're getting new learning just like you are, and that we're all doing it together. I know one of the things that you had to really change about the way you had done your leadership was the master schedule. And it required a massive overhaul, as often this work does. So can you talk to us a little bit more about what that work looked like?
Yeah, that was one of Patty's recommendations when she came in that first visit, along with, looking at, our foundations block. We absolutely looked at our scheduling and the way we were doing things. And Patty was like, this isn't going to work, Steph. If we're truly going to make effective changes, we need to essentially blow up your master schedule, and we need to look at it again. I keep saying, looking at it through a different lens. The way I used to have my master schedule structured, like, I'll go back to foundations again, because that's where we've done a lot of the work. I had all of my foundations blocks scheduled at the same time. So I thought, kindergarten students, they're at their best in the morning. Teachers are at their best in the morning. They're most focused. Everyone is going to do Haggerty and foundations block first thing in the morning. So from 9:30 to 10:10, that's when they were all scheduled. And, working with Patty, she helped me understand, in order for you to really be able to effectively get into classrooms, effectively coach, and effectively make changes, we need to look at that schedule, and we really need to, stagger that so that, you are not, foundations is not all in the morning, it's throughout the day, and we really needed to look at the amount of time that we were, giving that foundations block. We needed to look at the time that we were giving that full group. And we needed to have a very intentional small group time for students, which we really did not have. That small group was kind of within the whole group, ELA lesson. But now we have it structured where we actually have foundations and Haggerty, where we have our 60-minute ELA block, where we have a 40-minute of small group instruction. So that, that in itself was also a journey, because we were accustomed to doing things in a certain way. And we found that, well, I found out that we've changed it, that it wasn't most effective for students, and it wasn't most effective for teachers or myself as a leader. Now that we have, a schedule like, Patty had talked about, you talked about, Angela, we are really able to, get into classrooms more effectively, be able to give feedback around, what's happening in a more effective manner. So we really had to, really kind of take a look at that. But I think it's important to know, as a leader, you really need to know where your building is. You need to know where your teachers are, and you need to know, like, when you can really push and when you have to pull back the reins.
So important.
Yeah. So
So
Patty came in
important.
and said, we're gonna change the schedule. I'm like, whoa, Patty, just let's put the brakes on a little bit, and we didn't make that change to our master schedule right away, because my teachers weren't there yet. We weren't ready as a building to midway through the year, completely change that master schedule. So we worked on things that we could around the schedule that we had, and with the goal and the intent of, making those changes little by little. But again, I go back to knowing your teachers and knowing your staff and knowing when you can push and when you need to pull back.
And two, and we had to do like a no blaming, no shaming zone because teachers don't know what they don't know, and it was one of those things like they had just been thrown. Okay, here's your 90 or here's your 120. Fit it in as you best think it fits. Well, I mean, can you imagine opening up a curriculum and be like, okay, I've got all these things that I've got to piece together. And so that's where it's critically important that they're being led through the work by an instructional leader because the effect size of the instructional leader is so huge. So we've talked in a previous conversation that we have found as leaders, there are some pretty big levers for change. What do you think one of your biggest levers for change was as you've been doing this work?
Well, I think one big lever, again, I'll go back to school culture because to me, that's the groundwork. That's really the foundation that you build your building on. So when I came into this role, creating, a very inclusive, very family-like, very team-oriented, approach, I think that that's a really big lever. Like you had said, Angela, the teachers need to know that you're in this work with them, that it's a partnership, that you're learning alongside of them. So now, when I have, and even before, whenever anyone would come in, like any of my instructional coaches, my, ISTs, my reading specialists, Jen, our curriculum supervisor, I'm there next to them, as they are leading professional development. I try to be in every professional development. Now, does that always happen? No, it doesn't always happen, but I would say that 95% of the time it does happen. So I think that sends a clear picture to the teachers that Steph is in this with us, and she's going to help us along this journey. And I think the other really big lever was just being in those classrooms, like over and over and over, and providing feedback. Like every time you would go in, you would give them like a nugget, like, this is what I saw that went really well. This is where we need to make a little bit of a shift.
Yeah.
I'd like to jump in for 1 second about Stephanie's culture. Number one, what she's just described is 100% true. However, I want to make it clear that Stephanie has a productive school culture. And what that means is that they readily take feedback from Stephanie. It's not, oh, we're just all nice to each other, even though, yes, they're nice to each other. But Stephanie has created a culture in which feedback from her is accepted and, oh, nice tip. Thank you for that. So it's really important that we get the message across that Stephanie holds her teachers accountable for what she's asking them to do, but she doesn't do it in this is a gotcha kind of thing. It's,
Right.
hey, I noticed this. I will tell you, when we started on this journey, Stephanie knew what that teacher's manual said in foundations, so that teachers didn't miss a step. Many teachers, when we just let them off and go, interpret the teacher's manual the way they want to interpret the teacher's manual. But Stephanie could see, once she was in there all of the time, exactly what she should be looking for and exactly what she should be giving them feedback on. Consequently, students' results started to skyrocket. And guess what? The teachers felt good about what they were doing. So it's that productive culture that, in fact, the research indicates that it's the productive culture that's what teachers really want in their buildings. Sorry, thank you. You were only telling half of the story of what you had done, Stephanie.
No, and that's a really good point, Patty, because I've always said to my teachers ever since I became, a principal, like, the work that I do with you is never about, and I got you. That has never, ever been the culture that I have wanted to, have in this building. I always look at me being able to go in, observe classrooms, give feedback as a growing opportunity for them, but also for me, growing as a leader. And I think that that's what's really important, because the teachers, I hope that my teachers would say, that, Stephanie doesn't come in and, she's just picking apart everything I'm doing wrong. It's really about a journey of partnership, a journey of
100%.
teamwork, and a
Yes.
journey of family. We're all in this together, and the end result are our students. And they've
Absolutely.
embraced that.
Yeah. And
I believe they
we
have.
we know that this work leads to improved student achievement, but we're going to talk just for a few minutes about one other thing. We also know, though, that this work is empowering for teachers, and it can change the way teachers look at teaching, instruction, and growth, because it's not about perfection. It's about constantly just continuing to get better at our craft, and that we're all just experiencing growth. So, in a prior conversation we've had, we've talked about that the teachers begin to see this as feedback is for their growth as well as a teacher. And so it kind of changes even the way they start looking at the evaluation system, that this then can be a tool for growth. Again, it's not a gotcha. It's not something check for compliance. Oh, here they are doing their summative. But this can actually be a tool for instructional growth and for growth for the teachers. So can you talk just for a few minutes about what have you seen happen to your teachers and the empowerment that's happened to them?
Well, they've definitely seen how, making tweaks and changes to their instruction has really paid off. The data is showing it to us, so that's very empowering for a teacher to see, where a student starts, and where their journey, continues. And, I think another, piece of it is another piece of that, the data and feeling good about what they're doing is they are now getting, feedback from the other buildings that we're sending our students to, first grade teachers, reaching out, or instructional coaches from that building, noticing what a difference those first grade students are coming to their buildings equipped with. So that, in itself, you kind of have to puff your chest out to that. Although I will say that I have a very, very humble group of teachers, and they're not about like shouting their accolades. They're, they let it sink in, and they just continue to do the work. So I think that, that definitely, we've definitely seen a change around that. We've definitely seen, a change around the way they deliver their instruction. Before there were times when it was very monotonous, very slow. One thing I will always hear Pati saying, perky pace, perky pace, perky pace. So they have really, kind of adapted more of that perky pace and teaching with intention, being very intentional about what they're doing. Now, are we still working around that? Yes, we are. We definitely are. But they're very open to feedback. They're very open to, if we see one teacher that is excelling in an area, we may say, how about we set up some time where you can go and, observe this other teacher? They're willing to do that. They are, I see them, setting up meetings with our reading specialists, with our instructional support teachers on their own. Not Stephanie told me I need to do this, but they're doing that on their own because they, are starting to see the changes that they've made and how it's affecting and impacting their students. So, I truly believe that, all of those things are, have really, really, again, changed the culture and changed the way that they're thinking about, how they're going to deliver lessons.
Thank you, Stephanie. I do want to bring Pati in on the discussion as we begin to kind of start closing out our thoughts. There are a couple of questions that I want us to be sure that we get to. I've not been able to keep up and talk,
Trying.
question, and I've been trying, but there is one, Pati, that I think that it would be great if you've addressed, because we've all gone through it, and we've led schools through it, Pati. But how does a district change from a culture of fear to a culture of growth and a culture of we're all in it together. Can you address that briefly?
Yeah, I put a comment in the chat, but the leader sets the tone in the building. The leader sets the tone in the district. I mean, the superintendent sets the tone. It all comes down. And I think number one, I mean, Donna offered this earlier. Vulnerability is a huge one. As a principal, we have to be open to say, "Well, I don't know the answer to that, you guys. Let's find that out together." And then you follow up on that. Speaking of follow up is one of the biggest components of trust. And if a staff trusts their principal, then honestly, the research says they'll pretty much follow them everywhere. It shows that they do what they say they're going to do. I think one of the things that principals make a mistake about, which is what leads to a culture of fear, is acting like they know everything. And we've got to give up that notion and be side by side with our teachers, still the leader, but saying, "I don't know. I'll learn with you." I mean, what Stephanie just said is absolutely true. She's in all the professional developments. She gets out the Foundations Manual or the Wit and Wisdom Manual and says, let's find that. How does that? How does that work? Let me see. I wonder, is this what they mean? I mean, she's coming from a place of inquiry, just like the teachers are, not a dogmatic place at all. And that is a huge difference. Coincidentally, in the book, when we do a chapter on collaboration, because that's where this feeling comes from, is building an atmosphere of collaboration. And there's a little survey in there on trust. How do you display trust with your teachers? And for people who get the book, it would be for principals interesting to take that survey and find out how they could grow in making sure teachers trust them.
Thank you. So there's another one, and it says, how can we support and design instruction for struggling readers in both middle school and high school who didn't have the opportunity for these types of great early interventions? I just want to quickly address that. And then Patty, I know you'll have something to add to it because you've done so much middle school and high school work. But as a superintendent, when I began, the work was only, previous to me being here, was only being done. The science of reading work and instructional based practices. I had actually been the consultant, a Schools Cube consultant at the district where I ended up being at. And we came in for middle school and high school, and none of this had been done. And it was the exact same thing. It was starting with the design of a lesson and the delivery of the lesson, because we really had to drill into that scaffolding approach, because their grade level standards were here, but the students might be here on their reading ability. And so coming from a very good place and a good heart, a common thing to do is I'll lower the expectations a bit, or I'll lower the rigor, or I'll lower.
Started.
And so we absolutely can't do that. It's scaffolding. How do we get them there? And that's where the design of the teacher comes in, of knowing, okay, this is where they need to be. This is where they are. How do I get them there? So Patty, do you want to add a little? I know you'll be dying to. You want to jump in?
Yes, well, actually, the work at the secondary looks a little different than the work at elementary. And I know that Stephanie calls from Norristown Public Schools, but I'm going to do another shout out for Norristown Public Schools because they're doing absolutely amazing work. And at Eisenhower Middle School in Norristown, they have put these practices into place. And what we have found is interventions, and well, that there's really a 5-tiered system of support at the middle school level. Not only must we provide interventions, and I noticed that someone said that they've put in an intervention hour. We actually typically have so many students in the middle school that are behind. We need to be offering interventions all day for the most intensive readers. And then exactly what this listener said, or what this participant said, is an intervention hour for strategic learning of those content standards. So it does look a little bit different, but we need both an intensive intervention and then an intervention time for each content area where students who are struggling in the content can receive more intervention specifically related to state standards.
The results can happen quickly because, as you know,
100%.
when
You should see Eisenhower.
you were on the ground with us too in Wisconsin, and 66% of students were in tier 3. And by 3 benchmarks, a year and a half later, we had that down to 5% by doing exactly what you just did, because you helped us with that schedule. So yeah. Yeah. Patty, did you see another topic in there that you wanted to?
I haven't seen another one. I'm in a middle school and we are addressing needs in high school to build from the Lit Lab in middle school too. Um, I think we've addressed almost
Okay.
all of them. There's a good question Jeannie brought up. How does a leader establish trust with their teachers? Follow through is one of the biggest, as we discussed. And again, I would encourage leaders to take that trust survey. There's actually 5 facets of trust. It's not just follow through, it's benevolence and showing vulnerability and things like that. So the quiz has you decide, or by going through the quiz, it shows which of the 5 facets of trust you're the best at, and which ones you need to beef up a lot about. I think another thing that principals don't do enough of is, and Stephanie's great at this, and Angie, you were too, celebrating with teachers when they saw success. Not false celebrations, but true, genuine celebrations.
Yes. So this brings us to the end of our hour. I know we have talked about a lot and we've thrown a lot out there. This is just session 1 of our learning series. We have 2 others. This one was on universal instruction. We still have database decision making and collaboration that we'll be talking about. But I'll say just a tiny bit and then I'll let Patty close us out and see if Stephanie has a closing statement. I cannot stress enough that this really rises and falls on leadership. Not only are our students counting on us, but our teachers are too. This is so doable. We can do the work, but it is something that it is intentional work. And it is making that decision that we're going to get on this journey. We're going to transform literacy. Our students deserve better. Our staff deserve better. The school can do better. And getting everyone on the same page and saying, you know what? We're going to develop a culture where we are going to celebrate any and all successes. And we're going to continuously be pushing for growth, not to be perfect. And about that radical acceptance of data, which we're going to be talking about in our next one. But it's not that we aren't there, we can't get there. We just aren't there yet. Stephanie, would you like to say anything before Patty finishes us up today?
No, just to echo, what you said, Angela. I mean, again, the instructional leader, the principal really is at the helm of things. And if they're, not truly engaged in the work, it's not going to get done. I mean, your staff is looking to you, to lead them, so if you're willing to be in the mud, if you will, with them, I think that really, speaks volumes to them. So it's, and Patty, vulnerability. Whenever I talk about the work that I do with you, I said, I am probably the most vulnerable I've ever been in my career,
Yeah.
in this work. Truly, truly. But vulnerability in a good way, because you have pushed me in ways that really have helped me grow and help my staff grow. So
Thank
from the
you.
bottom of my heart, I truly, truly thank you. And I would be remiss if I didn't also thank the North Center Area School District for allowing me the opportunity to work with working with Schools Cubed, specifically Jen Lynch, who has really, been by my side throughout this work. I'm not an expert in everything, and I will be the first one to admit that, and I'm okay saying I need help in this,
Yes.
and I
Yeah.
think that's part of that vulnerability. And also, a huge shout out to my leadership staff who, support me each and every day, and my teachers. I mean, they are truly, truly rock stars, and I couldn't do what I do without all of those people. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to take a moment to thank.
Thank you. I remember going through the journey and saying, and Patty, I was being stretched and pulled and challenged and all of this. And I thought, I did say to her, though, the extreme power and the chance that I've been given to learn how to do this from the very beginning, from someone who was right there and to coach, and I thought, if I can just put all the stuff in my head aside and look at this as the growth opportunity that this can be, it is the hardest work still to this date, this today. It's the hardest work I've ever done. And Patty and I both say this at different points in the book. Hardest work I've ever done. But by far, leaps and bounds, the most rewarding work I've ever done in
100%.
my career.
Exactly.
Patty, you want to close it out?
No, just that my mission in life, I think, is to make sure people understand that it's the instructional leader that makes a difference. And we're not educating our instructional leaders, we're not supporting them nearly enough in this country. And if we really want to make a change in literacy outcomes in the United States of America, then we've got to get it to our instructional leaders. We just have to. So, Donna, how about you?
Okay. I echo that completely. And I've heard this from other people say, this is the hardest work I've ever done, but this is the most rewarding work I've ever done. Because how can you dismiss growth for your kids? That's why you're there. So it's all win-win for everyone. So folks, we will see you next week. Same time, same station. And thank you for being here. It was just an amazing day. Thank you so much. All right.
Yes. Next time it's on database decision making. And Jody Reese from Davis School District, who I think was on
I
today,
think she was on here. I saw her name. Yeah.
will be our special host or our guest next week.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thanks, everybody. And thank you, Donna, for even allowing us,
100%.
this opportunity.
Absolutely.
Yes.
My honor. All right.